Science tells us that the precious yellow substance we call gold was formed by explosions at the beginning of time, billions of light years ago. Dust from these vast cosmic events contained all the metals we find on Earth, including gold. But to the ancient Egyptians, gold was a gift of the gods. As the planet that would become the Earth cooled, this cosmic gold dust became bound together with the terrestrial rocks and part of the Earth's crust. In Egypt, gold deposits are found in the eastern desert. It appears on the surface as thread lines or veins running through solid rock, or as nodules when erosion releases it from its rocky prison. The ancient Egyptians began to find nuggets like this over 6,000 years ago. The wealth of gold in Pharaonic Egypt is legendary. In 1340 BC, the Mesopotamian ruler Mitanni asked Pharaoh Amenhotep III for a larger gold consignment, arguing that the pharaoh could afford it because gold occurs in Egypt like sand on the roads. The red dots on this modern map show just how abundant the gold deposits were. Over 60 sites have been identified associated with gold mining. Next to it is an incredibly rare papyrus map that shows the ancient Egyptian location of a New Kingdom mine. Locating and exploiting these gold deposits was made easy in many ways by the almost total lack of vegetation in the desert and by the darkness of its volcanic rocks. But the eastern desert was not the only place the ancient Egyptians found gold. Gold also came from Sudan, or the land of Kush to the south, and from the mysterious land of Punt, Arabia, Ethiopia, Somalia, and Uganda. It was only with the advent of the early dynastic period from about 3100 BC onwards that gold began to be extracted by systematic mining. Until then, it was simply panned for along the riverbanks in the wadis as the annual flood rose and receded, or they picked up nuggets from the dry riverbed. Mining was in full swing by about 3000 BC. It is reckoned that some 6.7 million ounces or 1.9 million kilos of gold were mined from these deposits over the 3,000 years of ancient Egyptian history. However, the process did not come without pain. Diodorus Siculus, writing towards the end of the Pharaonic period, tells us the miners follow in their labours the direction of the metallic threads and are assisted by the light of lamps in the subterranean darkness. The stones are carried outside and are crushed and reduced to small fragments. The workmen never cease from their toil. They are forced incessantly to work by bad treatment and by blows of the whip. Even children are not spared. Some are sent to carry the blocks of stone, others to break them into fragments. The fragments are taken by older workmen of over 30 years of age and crushed in iron mortars. The fragments thus are then found in mills and are turned by women and aged men. The actual process of processing the ore was brutal and primitive, but it was also ingenious. After the ore was reduced to powder, it was spread onto wide, slightly inclined tables where water was poured over it to separate the heavier gold from the lighter rubble. This operation was repeated enough times to create gold dust that could be melted in a crucible. By the beginning of the New Kingdom, goldsmiths had become important people in Egyptian society, one of the most flourishing aspects of their trade being the manufacture of jewellery to be buried with the dead or to be placed on the statues of the gods in the temples. The earliest surviving gold artifacts date from the 4th millennium BC and they're mostly beads and modest pieces of personal adornment, like this child's bracelet now on show at the Metropolitan Museum in New York. The hieroglyph for gold appears with the beginning of writing in the first dynasty. Gold is ever present in ancient Egypt, and mention of it always brings to mind the treasure of Tutankhamun. Nowhere else in Egypt has so much ancient jewellery been found as in the boy king's famous tomb. Ancient texts report that vast quantities of gold, silver and bronze, electrum, a mixture of gold and silver, were used to make statues or to be used in temples to immortalize the pharaoh. Only one statue is known to survive. This is the statue of Amun, which now resides in the Met in New York. The body is made in a single casting. The arms and the godly regalia were soldered on later. In his right hand he holds a scimitar, in the left an ankh sign. On pylons and temple walls in the New Kingdom, Amun-Re is often depicted like this, holding a single-edged sword with a convexly curved blade. It confers upon him the power to vanquish his enemies. It is almost certain that this statue would have originally also had a crown, but that has been lost. It was the pharaoh's prerogative to be buried in gold. Tutankhamun's death mask is one of the masterpieces of ancient Egyptian art. It originally rested directly on the shoulders of the mummy inside the innermost gold coffin, and is constructed of 2 sheets of gold hammered together. It weighs 22.5 pounds or 10.23 kilos and stands 54 centimetres high. From the front, the king is shown wearing the royal nemes made of gold inlaid with strips of lapis lazuli. On his forehead stands the royal diadem bearing the vulture's head and cobra, the insignia of Upper and Lower Egypt. The back is inscribed with a spell from the Book of the Dead, and across his shoulders he wears a broad collar made of 5 rows of red and blue semi-precious stones representing the cosmos. Yellow ochre paint was used to mimic gold in wool art because of the surfaces were porous and gold leaf would have soon flaked off. The arsenic and sulfur-based pigment was highly toxic, but remained in use throughout Europe until chrome yellows and oranges were developed using modern industrial processes in the 19th century. Gold was always associated with the kings and the gods. In the Old Kingdom, kings were viewed as the physical manifestation of the divine. They were the builders of pyramids, an enduring symbol of the pharaoh's absolute power. In the Middle Kingdom, the concept of kingship was revised. Rather than being gods, kings were demoted to being merely divinely appointed representatives of the gods on earth. The king's duty towards his people required him to safeguard their well-being in this world and the next. And by the New Kingdom, the pharaoh and his courtiers were so rich, gilding on coffins and being buried with gold jewellery was common. Gold was the colour of the skin of the gods. Their hair was made of lapis lazuli and their bones were made of iron. So the myths go. From the New Kingdom onwards, funeral images of the wealthy show women bedecked in gold earrings, sweeping gold broad collars, bracelets, bangles, necklaces and singlets. Golden pectorals were placed on the chests of men, along with broad collars to protect them on their journey to the afterlife and to show their status when they got there. Less wealthy members of society imitated the golden artefacts of their elite neighbours, with items made of faience, clay dipped in a blue-green glaze. Although gold was used as jewellery and for personal adornment,
it was not used as money for most of ancient Egyptian history. This is because Egypt's economy was a barter economy. Goods and labour were traded directly rather than exchanged for money. The economy was what historians call a bullion economy. Small pieces of metal, gold, silver, copper or bronze could be traded for goods and services, but coins were never struck. Known as diben, these small pieces of metal were kept in boxes and taken to market to be used like money, but the system was more flexible than cash transactions alone. For example, a 19th dynasty slave girl priced at 4 diben and 1 kite of silver was paid for with 6 bronze vessels, 2 diben of copper, 15 linen garments, a shroud, a blanket, and a pot of honey. It was not until the pharaoh needed to pay Greek mercenaries that he needed cash, and so the first gold coins were minted in 360 BC. Known as status, they bore both Egyptian and Greek images. For example, impressions of an Athenian owl, a horse, and an olive branch were commonly used. Gold would continue to play a vital role in funeral art until the end of pagan Egypt. That is around the end of the 4th century of the Common Era. Here we can see Romano-Egyptian coffins. The faces of the dead are recognizable as individuals for the first time. The women are still shown wearing their best gold jewellery. The men have golden wreaths around their heads. The motifs are distinctly Greco-Roman, but the imagery serves the same purpose as those of the New Kingdom and Middle Kingdom counterparts. The golden wreath connects the wearer with the sun god Re and signifies their successful transition to the afterlife. If you have enjoyed this brief account of ancient Egyptian gold and want to find out more about ancient Egypt, please don't forget to subscribe.